All right. So joining me today is tight end Brandon Barnes, a man who's played for the NFL, the AAF, the XFL, and now the USFL, and is looking to get back in the NFL in the 2022 season. Brandon, how are you doing today? And thank you for joining me.
I'm doing great, man. How about you?
I definitely cannot complain. Once again, thank you so much for coming on. And again, I apologize for making you wait.
It's cool, man. It's cool. I'm just
Uh,
glad to be on here.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So why don't we start with a brief introduction in your own words, and then we'll go through the questions that I sent you earlier.
Okay, well, I'm Brandon Barnes. Uh, as he said, I've played in the NFL, the XFL, the AAF, and now the USFL. Hopefully, trying to get back into the NFL. I'm from Alabama. Went to Alabama State University, smaller school, D1 AA. I walked on to Alabama State, had zero offers coming out of high school. My high school was not really that great at football at the time. They're actually getting a lot better right now. So shout out to Russell County High School. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's just a brief, summary of, about myself.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you mentioned it just a minute ago. You were raised in Alabama, so I mean, you got to play all your games in Birmingham this season. How was that for you?
That was pretty cool. All my family got to make the games, pretty much my aunts, cousins, friends, family. Pretty much everybody that could make it, they was able to make it. So it was fun playing at home.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, reading your NFL draft profile, Lance Zierlein, I guess you could say he's a respected NFL analyst,
Hmm.
points out several strengths that you have. I wanted to run past you. So, he says that your ability to high point passes, your above average wingspan, and your athletic ability are three things that scouts will see when they watch your film. Is there anything not on this list of top three strengths that you feel should be?
Um, yeah, I feel like my route running ability, because I'm just being completely honest. Every level I've been on, I've never really been checked by like a linebacker or a safety, but like a lot of times I haven't been kind of used to that strength. So I feel like my route running and my route running and me being able to get separation is like a slight strength that I have.
I would agree. I would agree. I would say route running is a definite strength of yours. Um, as far as your weaknesses go, he listed slow play speed when compared to drills, lack of development as a run blocker, and your route work was basic in college, which, I mean, as you said, you were a walk on and not very adept in high school. So, I mean, that definitely makes sense. Talk to me about the developmental strides you've taken over your 5 year pro career.
Okay, well, hold on one second. Yeah. So, sorry about that. But anyway, so as far as developmental, things that I had to work on in college, pretty much everything, as far as like football, because I mean, I went to high school. I really wasn't strongly developed because my high school wasn't really that good. A lot of my coaches, to be honest, they coached me the best they could, and I love them to death. But a lot of them really didn't play football, so it's kind of like when I went to college, I was raw, like raw, just raw athleticism, just needed to be coached up. So when I first got to college, I was actually a receiver. I played receiver my first year, and I knew how to run routes from like out wide and stuff like that. But when I got to college, I transitioned to tight end, and it's a big difference. Like running routes out of 3 point stands. Your releases are a lot different coming out of 3 point stands. Um, I was used to blocking cornerbacks. So when you blocking cornerbacks, it's a lot different from blocking them than blocking like defensive ends and stuff like that. And I know like, I read those little draft scouting reports and stuff like that. And I mean they're basing it off your film. And a lot of the stuff that they were saying, like it was more so I would think it was more so scheme related, because I did run a lot of basic routes, like especially my last year of college, I didn't run many routes at all. Like I just kind of felt like I was underutilized in a lot of ways, and like people tend to get shocked when I actually get in front of people because they're like, man, like he's really athletic and he really knows how to run routes, but like it wasn't showcased on film, so it's like they think that you can't do it, and it's like, yeah, I can. I can do everything that any tight end could do. I just, you know, haven't been able to really showcase it.
Absolutely. I mean, you were learning the position basically from scratch. So, I mean, yeah, I could definitely see that. I mean, it's going to take some time to get used to it and get comfortable to the point where you're not necessarily thinking and just kind of playing.
Right.
Um, so, you graduate college in 2016, entering the 2017 draft. Talk to me about what you were hearing about your draft stock prior to.
Well, I was hearing late rounds. I took a couple draft visits. I pretty much my senior year in college, I talked to every NFL team that stopped by Alabama State. So that was a range from one to about 25 to 2017, like that stopped by during the season, and I literally talked to everyone. So, pretty much I kind of knew I was going to go to the NFL my senior year, but I didn't know, you know, what round or anything like that during the season. I really want to focused on that. But once the season ended, I was pretty much focused on pro day because coming from a small school, pro day is very important. Like it can literally make you or break you. And once I had a really good pro day, I was hearing stuff as far as like from fifth round to undrafted free agent.
Interesting. Interesting. It's kind of weird how it ranges so much, but I mean, there's so many guys that in their draft, I guess it's
Yeah,
hard to be real accurate on it. So
right.
ultimately, you end up unselected, unfortunately, but you sign almost immediately with Detroit. What did you like about Detroit, and were they the only team that offered you at that time?
Uh, I'm gonna be honest. I probably got after the draft because the only red flag I had, because every team gives red flags and stuff like that. The
Yeah,
only knock that I had as far as just being raw talent, that wasn't the issue. I had a knee surgery that like I don't know if they was completely like sold on it, but it was like a knock against me. So I think that's what caused me to go undrafted. And I was in an extremely deep tight end class. Like I probably was in the deepest tight end class in NFL history. So, it's not like really a bad thing to be a part of that class because a lot of starters that are in the NFL right now are currently part of that 2017 class. So, you know, I was in a deep class, and um, after the draft, I was kind of sad, but I was like, I knew I'm going somewhere, but my phone was literally blowing up. I got like maybe 50 calls within the first hour after the draft, and kind of, I was kind of, like I didn't know which one to choose. I took a pre-draft visit to Detroit, and I chose Detroit. And what I liked about Detroit, it was, I liked the coach I had, Al Golden. He was a good coach. Coach Caldwell was the head coach. Al Golden was my position coach, and he was really detailed. Like he was the type of coach I really needed coming out.
understandable. Understandable. Is he a former player?
I think he played maybe 1 year professionally, but he played in college. But he used to be the head coach at the University of Miami.
Very nice. Okay, I was gonna say I knew that name from somewhere. I'm not much of a
Mhm.
college fan to be honest, so that would
Yeah,
explain
he
why I
was.
wasn't aware of him.
Yeah, he
So
was
you
the
end up
head
finishing.
coach there.
Sorry about that. So you
No,
end
you
up
good.
finishing your rookie training camp in New York with the Jets. Talk to me about the coaching you received from former Philadelphia Eagles player Jimmy Johnson, a former tight end himself, and a 10-year NFL vet.
Okay, so Jimmy Johnson, when I went there, because okay, the way I ended up going to the New York Jets was I think we had like a scrimmage in Detroit the day before we had to leave to go to a joint practice against I don't know who was, I think the Colts at the time. They was having a joint practice against the Colts, and I literally pulled my hamstring during that scrimmage. So I didn't know how the NFL worked. I was just, I had been doing really good. I knew I had been doing really good. I knew I had a legitimate chance of making the team. I think that scrimmage I might have graded out like a 90 something. So I was, doing really good. And after I pulled my hamstring, I'm a rookie, so I don't know much. I didn't have anybody that went to the league before me to give me advice or anything like that. So I'm literally learning on the fly. And all the veterans are telling me, like, man, just make sure you're good. And I'm just like, what you mean make sure I'm good? They just like, make sure you're good. So probably like a week later, well, not even a week later, probably 3 days later, I end up getting cut, like surprisingly. So like I literally got cut because of the hamstring, like, and I knew it was strictly because of the hamstring. So once I got cut, less than a week later, the Jets called me to work me out, and my hamstring wasn't really 100%, but I'm just like, bro, I got to get back in there. So I went to the Jets, and they ended up signing me, and I played all the preseason games, and Jimmy Johnson, he was pretty. I liked him. He was a laid back coach. He's kind of different from Al Golden. Al Golden was really detailed, really like he overemphasized stuff, but I really needed that type of coaching because I was so raw, so like I really wasn't detailed coming out of college. Like my coaches, there was good coaches, but just being honest, I wasn't really detailed like I should have been, out of college. And, you know, going to Jimmy Johnson, it was just like a total 360. He was more of a loose coach, and he told me he had a special place for me, like, because he actually went to HBCU too. So he was saying, like, I had a special place in his heart. He was a good dude, though. I liked him a lot. I ended up seeing him in the XFL, matter of fact. He was coaching for the Washington team.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Small world occurrences in football when it happens like that.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so after the Jets, as you said, you obviously performed well in Detroit because they brought you right back. What happened in Detroit that you ultimately don't stick this time?
So basically, we get a new coach, Matt Patricia. Um, I just wasn't one of his guys. I mean, that's what it really boiled down to. I wasn't one of his guys, and um, I hate to say it, like that's pretty much where I'm gonna lead that at. But I mean, if you talk to a lot of higher end NFL guys, you kind of seen the transition in Detroit at that time. So that's all I'm gonna say at that about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't want you to start any controversy or anything or potentially
Oh
get yourself
no,
in hot water, but
oh no, I'm
I would
not.
say that. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm not gonna say anything bad. I just, I mean, I enjoyed my time there. I was thankful for them bringing me back. I wish I could have stayed longer, but it's just I wasn't Patricia's guy. I just
Yeah,
say that.
yeah, it happens. I mean, it does happen, especially when
Yeah,
you're from the New England coaching tree. I'd say they
yeah.
tend to stick with their players. But with that being said, what happens in the 2018 season?
So the 2018 season, I didn't go anywhere after I got cut because I got cut during the summertime. So once I got cut, I didn't go anywhere because it's kind of hard to go somewhere when you don't have much film. Because I played in the preseason game the year before, like all of them, but I didn't play much. Like I blocked, played special teams. That was pretty much it. So I didn't play a lot in those preseason games, and that's what kind of hurt my chances going into that next year. So when that going into the next season, I was pretty much just kind of like a rookie all over again. So once you get cut, it depends on what time you get cut too. I got cut during the summertime, so it's kind of hard to get on a new team before camp because pretty much a lot of teams have their roster set at the end of summer and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to get on teams. So I worked out for a few teams and I did really good at the workouts, but all the coaches that worked me out, they was like, man, like you had a hell of a workout, but you don't have film, like, and you need to get film. So after like my fourth or fifth workout that year, I heard the same thing every time. So I had to work out for the Redskins and who are now the Commanders. So I had to work out for them and Doug Williams pulled me out to the side and Doug Williams was like, because they had this XFL coming. Doug Williams was like, look, no, it wasn't the XFL, it was the AAF. He was
Yeah.
telling me, he said, look, you need to get some film. Like, he said, you talented. He said, you can play in this league. Like, no doubt about it. But he said, nobody's going to sign you if you don't get any film. And he was the first person I ever talked to in a front office after they sent me home, like before they sent me home. Usually they just send you home if they don't sign you. So when he told me that, I was like, okay, I have to go to this AAF. So that's what I ended up doing. I had ended up going to the AAF during the fall of 2018 because they had like a mini camp that year.
Okay, makes sense. So you prefaced me into my next question perfectly. I mean, in 2019, a new league begins, the Alliance of American Football. So Doug Williams is actually the man that pushed you to go into the league. I mean, was it immediately a consideration for you, or was it not until he said something?
Well, at first, I kind of heard it was coming, but you know, I, you don't know any better, and then the ego in you wants you to, NFL. Like I'm an NFL guy. I know I'm an NFL guy. I know I could play in this league. I see people every day like that. I know I could play. Like so. My thing is when I first heard about it, I'm like, no, I'm an NFL guy. But then after Doug Williams told me, like, broke it down to me, like, you're literally like, it don't matter how good you do at a workout. If you don't have any game film to show off of it, you're not gonna go anywhere. Like, nobody's gonna sign you based off of workout alone, unless you like a super young player. So I was like, man, let me go to the AF. Let me see what it's about. So I ended up signing with the Birmingham Iron first. I ended up playing for Memphis Express, but I signed with the Birmingham Iron first.
Interesting. I did not know that. So you actually
Yeah,
landed with your hometown team with the AAF at first as well.
yeah, and I was looking forward to it, but I ended up getting cut. Um, and I can say this because it's not like bad, and I know Tim Lewis now, but like, yeah, Tim Lewis, who was the D coordinator for the Houston Gamblers, he was the head coach with the Birmingham Iron, and he ended up cutting me.
That's
Yep. So he cut
ironic.
me, and he cut me for literally no reason at all. Like we were at home. So like we did the 3 day mini camp, and I had a good mini camp. No lie. I would I would be dying if I'm lying to you. I had a great mini camp, and literally I'm at home for maybe 2 weeks. It's like the week of Christmas. And I'm on the way to Orlando to get my little cousin who plays at Arizona State. We was on the way to Orlando to pick up his car. That was his Christmas gift. So me and a couple of my cousins drove down there and drove back to Alabama. And as soon as we get to Orlando, I get a call from Tim Lewis, and he was just like, "Yeah, something came up, and we have to go in a different direction." And I'm just like, "What?" Like I hadn't even practiced. Like how you hadn't even seen me like practice. So I was hurt. Like I don't think I've ever been that hurt in my life. Like from football, but I ended up later on signing to Memphis Express, and I walked in like literally the first day as the starter. Like walked in, they were already like going through camp, and they had been in camp for maybe a week and a half, and they had a scrimmage. So my first practice was a live scrimmage against another one of the AAF teams, and I literally caught like 4 or 5 balls in the scrimmage. Didn't know the plays or nothing. Just was basically asking the quarterback every time, like, "Hey, what's the play?" Because I didn't know anything. But
That's awesome.
after, yeah,
That's crazy. I would not have guessed that. I mean, I can imagine it was quite the blow to your ego at the time, given that you didn't think you needed to go to the AAF, and then you end up getting cut fairly quickly.
yeah,
So that's got to be a hard pill to swallow at the moment. But you end up bouncing back, like you said. You end up with Memphis through 8 games. You end up saying targets in 5 of them. You total 12 targets, 9 receptions for 75 yards, and added a 2-point conversion. But there was one game to me that stuck out in particular. It was like a game against the Orlando Apollos, who were the best team in the league at that point. I believe they ended the season 7-1. In this game, you caught 4 passes for 24 yards in a game decided by just 4 points. What sticks out to you in this game as to why you saw such an uptick in receptions?
uh, because the way Orlando was playing, they kind of respected our speed because we had a lot of speed. So they respected our speed, and they pretty much played in like a cover 4 type of look. So like a lot of my routes in Memphis, I didn't run too many routes. Like our route tree was kind of for tight ends, it was kind of generic. So I ran a lot of like chip flats that week because they had some really good DNs. I remember, I think one of them ended up signing back to the NFL, but they had the best team, of course. And I'm running chip flats, so if it's cover 4 and everybody's running downfield, I'm in the flats by myself. So I literally was just a check down guy. So that's literally how my receptions kind of added up in that game.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes perfect sense now that you explain it that way. So, as we all know, at this point in time, the AAF ultimately ends up collapsing after 8 games due to Tom Dundon, basically. At the time, did you feel you had done enough to warrant more NFL consideration, or were you concerned that you hadn't seen enough time on the field yet?
Well, I played in every game, so I felt like, and then I was fairly young, so I felt like I would get another shot. I kind of had to stay on my agent about it, but yeah, I kind of knew I was gonna get another shot. But the only thing that was bad about the AAF, I didn't really run too many routes. So like I had a lot of blocking film, but I really blocked pretty good in the AAF because my blocking had improved a lot. So I was kind of concerned, but like I thought I would get back in the NFL. Like, I'm really strong on my faith, so I just feel like, if it's for me, it'll happen. So it luckily did, but it was, yeah, I was just a little concerned, but not really.
Makes sense. So, following the 2019 AAF collapse, the Jon Gruden led Oakland Raiders give you a call. Talk to me about your time in Oakland with the Raiders and what was your second season with an NFL team, and how was it different than working under a guy like Todd Bowles?
Okay, so when I remember when I first worked out for the Raiders, it was kind of late in the summer. They had just started training camp. Or no, it was like just started training camp. That was like at the end of their first week, and I worked out for them, and had a really good workout. It was just me by myself, and I was prepared. I knew I was gonna blow them away. So after I literally blew them away, Mayock, all of them come shake my hand, and I talked to their head, their tight end coach, Frank Smith. And Frank was, he pulled me off to the side. We talked in his room, just wanting to get to know me, feel me out as a person. And he was just like, he asked me the question. He said, okay. He said, I see how talented you are. I see you can play. He said, why are you not on the team? Like he asked me straight up, why am I not on the team? And I told him, I said, I haven't really had a fair shake. You know what I mean? Like I haven't had a fair chance to really prove myself. So after that, he was like, I'm gonna do my research to make sure you don't have any baggage because he just couldn't believe it. He just literally could not believe he thought something was wrong. He thought I had like some type of domestic issue or something like that. It was funny, like, because I've never done anything. I've never been to jail. Worst I've ever done was have like a speeding ticket or something. But like, you know, so he was asking me all these questions, and he was like, "Okay, well, He said, "I'm gonna bring you back." He said, "Because I like you. You run good routes. You block pretty well. So I'm gonna try to bring you back." So I just said, "Okay, but I've heard this before, so it's just like, I'm not really concerned." So then, like a week later, they bring me back. So I ended up playing in all four of the preseason games, but going through camp, it was pretty cool. I was doing my thing in camp, and I felt like I did a lot of positive stuff. They respected me out there, and I literally, what happened was I ended up during training camp. I ended up being a roommate with Darren Waller.
That's
So Darren
awesome.
Waller was my roommate. I didn't know Darren Waller from a can of paint, but he was my roommate, and I thought I had a legitimate shot at making a team. And man, they tight end room was just too deep. Like literally, that was the problem. Tight end room was way too deep, and I couldn't. I just didn't have a chance there. But playing for Gruden, Gruden is a high IQ. Like he has a very high football IQ, very high. So like, you pretty much got to know your stuff. Like you really got to know your stuff. And Todd Bowles was more of a defensive minded coach, so the offense that they ran was kind of simple. But Jon Gruden's is very complex. That's really the main difference.
Interesting. I mean, that makes a lot of sense given what we know about both men, but that was not something that I necessarily expected. So I appreciate you giving the insight onto that. If you're watching, drop a like for Brandon. He's had an amazing career, and we are only halfway through the questions, so there's a lot more to cover. With that being said, in 2020, the XFL is reborn for the second time. When this happens, is this an immediate interest for you, or is another I'm an NFL guy type situation?
Um, no, because I knew what it was. I knew I needed to get that film. I needed to get the film ASAP. So basically, I was like, man, like I gotta do what I gotta do. And the AAF, it was like it wasn't as publicized, but the XFL was really publicized. So it was like, it was a good league. I knew it was gonna have a good product on the field. A lot of the guys that went to the AAF ended up playing in the XFL. So, it was gonna be the same type of competition, same type of guys. Even some of the guys that went to the NFL and end up getting cut, they end up going back to the XFL. So I was looking forward to it. And, it was one of those things where I was just excited about. And then they was having a draft, and I had the opportunity to get drafted, which I had never got drafted. So I felt like it was pretty cool.
Absolutely. So once again, you preface me into my next question amazingly. You end up drafted by the Los Angeles Wildcats, quite high, I might add. Talk to me about what it meant to be drafted for the first time in your professional career.
It felt really good because, you got a lot of people, they was, supporting it, and they seen it go, and they had social media and stuff like that. So I was actually if I wasn't the first tight end drafted in the XFL, I might have been the second. But I know I was drafted like fairly high. And, it was just excited. Like, like, man, I really got drafted. Like even though I didn't get drafted, I got drafted. So it was just I was excited, and I was, happy, and I was just happy to be playing again in a legitimate league.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's kind of funny how much your perspective had changed in just a season's time. But that's
Right.
interesting to hear. I appreciate that you sharing that with us because I haven't really gotten that out of other players in the past that I've talked to. We've talked to Cody Brown, the safety from the Philadelphia Stars, who also played in the
Yeah.
AAF and XFL. And then we also
Mhm.
talked to Jordan McRae, the center from Birmingham, who played in the AAF and the XFL as well. So I didn't get that part of it from them, so I appreciate that. While with the XFL, you seem to reach another level with your blocking prowess. Were there any coaches in particular that had helped you lead to this improvement?
Yeah. Ty Knott. Ty Knott was a big impact on that. He was my tight end coach in LA, and he was actually the running back coach in Memphis. So that's how pretty much football works. Coaches bounce around and stuff like that. So Ty Knott, he was a big factor in that. And then as well as Fontenot. I forgot his first name. It might be
Larry?
Jerry. Larry, he played a long time in the NFL, played center for the Saints. But
Yes,
he
sir.
was he was one of the O-line coaches for the Packers, I want to say before he came to LA. He was like, we used to do O-line drills with them every single day. So it, naturally, you're doing something, you're practicing it, and he's good at explaining stuff, and he's actually a good coach to play for because he's not really like a bad guy. So that really helped with my blocking like a ton. A ton. I mean, literally, I could give all my credit to those two guys. They really worked us at it.
That's amazing. I mean, it shows on film. It really does. I mean, you can see your film from the AAF, and you're blocking. I mean, you're doing your thing for sure. But then you see 2020 film from the XFL, and it's like, wow, this dude's running dudes over at this point. Like he's literally like blocking them straight out of the play and stuff. So it's definitely, you could see the improvement year over year.
Yeah.
So 5 games into the 2020 season, the XFL unfortunately is forced to shut down. How did this affect you as an individual going through a second shutdown in 2 seasons?
It affected me probably less than most players because I ended up having an injury the last XFL game. So I got hurt the fifth game of the year, fourth quarter. I tore my left patella tendon. So I was already gonna be out a year. I already knew that. You get what I'm saying? So it really didn't affect me much to shut down, but it kind of affected me later on because if the league would have came back, I would have maybe been able to showcase my talent a lot faster, so I could get back in the NFL during the 2021 year. But that's pretty much how it affected me. I mean, I was gonna be out from football a year regardless. It just
Makes
sucked though, 'cause it sucked.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I mean, getting to that level, finally getting an opportunity to play and start, like you said, right away, and then not only suffering the injury, but then having the league shut down on top of it. That's got to be a lot. Um, But ultimately, you had a major injury, like we just talked about. What's your next move as a player at this point? I mean, are you just focused on your rehab? Are you still reaching out to teams during this point, or how exactly are you attacking that?
At that point, because this was the XFL. So at that point, I was pretty much just attacking my rehab, just focusing on getting back to 100%. And then by the time I got back to 100%, it was around the time where dudes was signing, going, during the spring, signing to NFL teams and stuff. So, I was trying to get back in the NFL, and then at that point, I kind of knew like how the film situation works. It's like you may have some film, but it got to be recent. Like it's always something, So it's literally, what have you done for me lately? That's how the league works. So the fact that I hadn't played, in a year, it wasn't a high chance of me going to the NFL. And I tried my hardest, but it just didn't happen. And my agent was pretty much telling me that year, he was like, I was really frustrated. I ended up working after that. I had 3 jobs over a year span, but I was working at my old high school coaching, and then I worked at Nike and Costco's for like 6 months. So I was working those two jobs and working out every day until the USFL was coming. So I kind of got word that the USFL would be here, and I pretty much was ready for it. So
Can you hear me okay?
yeah.
Sorry about that. I apparently randomly lost internet in the middle of this, but
Oh,
we should be okay now. So I'm sorry about that. What were you saying? You were working 3 jobs. You were just done with Costco, and I did not catch the other place. I'm sorry.
so I was working at Costco's, and then I was working at Nike.
Gotcha. So
six
at
months.
that point, it had been a long year and a half, I imagine, since the XFL shut down. Did you ever consider indoor football as an option, or was it that just wasn't an option?
Um, the indoor wasn't an option only because they don't use tight ends. So I
That's
would have
true.
had to go. I would have had to go play receiver, and it was kind of it was just weird. So I didn't consider the indoor, but I actually considered the CFL. So so I worked out for matter of fact, I worked out for a CFL team before I actually got drafted to the USFL, like probably a couple weeks before. So I knew I was gonna play football again. I just, it was a matter of who's gonna pull the trigger first. Is the USFL gonna pull it, or is it gonna be the CFL?
Gotcha.
So
Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
so I worked out for the Edmonton Elks, worked out for the head coach, everything. So and they liked me. They wanted to, they was interested in signing me, and the USFL draft came. So
Interesting. So maybe you can shed some light on something. Are you allowed to leave for the CFL, or is it only the NFL?
I think it's only the NFL from what I've been hearing, and they saying like pretty much if an NFL team cuts you, I think they get your rights back to the same team you was in or something like that.
That is exactly what I have heard about the rights going back to your original team. So I think
Yeah,
that's perfect. Personally, I think that's great. I think that the fact that you're allowed to go pursue the NFL, and given that they're in different time spaces, you could potentially not make a team and then come right back to the USFL. That's an incredibly smart move on the USFL's part, because you're going to keep people who are trying to make it to the NFL on an every year basis, and they may not necessarily make it. So I think it's a great
exact, exactly. I mean, it's clutch really, because you're gonna play again, so it's really you really can't beat it.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think it was, like I said, incredibly smart by the USFL to make that move. Ultimately, you decided to head to the USFL, as we just talked about. Did you have any previous connections to Houston prior to the draft, or any coaches for that matter?
Um, Trying to think. I probably had a couple coaches that I knew across the league, that were on other, staffs or whatever. But um, no, I didn't know any of my coaches in Houston. It was just crazy. Like, so the little pre-draft process for the USFL, it was a lot different than the XFL. They didn't do showcases or anything like that. They just wanted you to send your film, get in the draft pool. The draft pool had to select you because they didn't select everybody. I mean, it was some guys I thought would have been in the USFL that just were not picked to be in the pool. So, you know, pretty much like I had made a highlight tape from the XFL, and then I made a lot of workout videos like over the course of my injury. So like, I showed pretty much every type of drill that I learned over the years, my rehab, me working out, me lifting heavy weights, just all types of stuff. And I sent that out pretty much to the USFL pool. And luckily I was the first tight end selected. Like and this was the second time. So I just felt like, okay, well, this team believes in me, so I was excited, man.
I believe it. I believe it. And like you said, it's the second time you've been drafted. Both times you've been drafted really high. So I think that's a good indication of where your talent actually lies. Given the fact that you maybe don't have the film, didn't have the film. Now
Yeah,
you have plenty of film.
right.
So
So it's
hopefully,
so it's a good thing. I feel like people see the talent. Somebody just got to bring it out. That's the thing. Like, I feel like I'm capable of doing anything I need to do as far as playing. It's just the right fit. Really, that's really what it boils down to.
agreed. Agreed. I would say you're a perfect mix of what you want in a tight end. I mean, you're a former receiver, so you can obviously catch the ball. You can run routes. You can split out wide if it came to it. Play in the slot. You can line up in line at this point. You're a pretty solid blocker. Yeah, I mean, what more could you want in a tight end? Quite honestly, I mean, you got plenty of athletic upside as well. So I mean, there's really no reason why teams should be held back from giving you a call at this point. Before you got drafted, you mentioned how they kind of select you for the player pool. Did you know prior to the draft that there were teams that were interested in you that high, or was it a situation where you had no idea where you were going to go?
To be honest, I had no idea. Uh, no idea at all. Like, I mean, I seen some of the other tight ends in the draft pool or whatever. And I was familiar with some of those guys because a lot of them played in the XFL. And so I'm looking at them. I'm like, okay, this dude's pretty good. This dude's pretty good. So, at that point, I didn't expect to be the top tight end took, but I was like, I know I'm gonna go somewhere. I just hope I go somewhere where I can, show what I'm capable of and show it, kind of like I did in the XFL, because I feel like that's probably the best receiving film I have, like receiving wise, because I was catching a lot of balls out there too.
Agreed. Agreed. So you end up drafted by Houston, like we just talked about. The second time in your career you've been drafted. Did it mean more or less this time?
Uh, it didn't mean as much as the first time because the first time I was really excited. The second time it was more so like I had a mindset of like, I kind of been on a mission. I was just like, okay, I got injured, so I got to show that first of all, my injury doesn't bother me. Second of all, I seen the other tight end we drafted. Well, we didn't. I don't know if we drafted him or not, but Julian. And I looked at his film, and I'm just like, okay, like Julian is pretty good. You feel me? So I'm like, I gotta really beat this dude out because it's, like in these leagues, it's no politics. Like you drafted, okay, you're drafted, but you get paid the same. So anybody can start. You get what I'm saying? So my focus was just doing the best I could do. Showing that I'm able to play and showing that I'm healthy and just being durable. That was my biggest thing, being durable. So
Absolutely.
that's really what I wanted to show.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I'm glad that you pointed out that Julian's a respectable tight end as well. I'm a big
Oh yeah,
fan of his as well. I think obviously Houston had a lot of want to run the ball, bringing in both of you guys and then Mark Thompson. I mean, talk
yeah,
about a hell
yeah,
of a running back.
yeah. Mark is good too. I mean, very good.
Yes, sir. He is an NFL back if I've ever seen one personally. But
No,
honestly, I think that Houston had one of the most talented rosters in the league this season. So I don't think it's a stretch that we could see as many as, I mean, 10's probably pretty high, but maybe even 10 players off Houston signed. And like I said, I know that's a pretty high number, but I truly believe I could list them off the top of my head, honestly. So there's a lot of guys on that roster that I was amazed to see how your guys' season went.
yeah.
So as I just mentioned, you have an extremely talented roster, yet this season ends up fairly disappointing overall. I mean, you end up starting by winning and then losing 7 straight. Talk to me about how it felt in the locker room at this point.
Frustrating. Oh my God. Like I think I'm gonna be honest. Like I've never been a part of a team that was that talented and we just could not finish. Like, I mean, literally, I've been a part of some really talented teams, and I mean, just my whole life. Like my high school team was very talented, but we kind of lacked the resources that we are playing in like a bigger division than we were supposed to be playing in. Honestly, that's why we couldn't win. But this league, I felt like our D line was the most dominant. We had the best linebacker crew, hands down. Like it wasn't close. Both our linebackers was all USFL. We had Will Likely and Micah Abernathy on the back end, you know, and there was some ball hawks. You know, we had really good receivers that was fast, could run. We had Mark Thomas. You know, our O line was a pretty good run blocking O line. You know, so I was kind of in awe. You know, like man, like how are we this talented? And I'm looking at the other teams, and I'm just like, there's no knock on those guys, but I mean, they pretty much respect us too. Like, you know, they know we were talented, but we just could not finish for like those consecutive weeks. And I mean, even the first game, we could have lost the first game the same way. Dude, I think they threw a Hail Mary and the guy's foot was out of bounds, like 1 foot. But if he would have literally been maybe a foot to, behind them, they beat us the same way everybody else did in the last couple seconds. So it was frustrating. I mean, it's frustrating losing games like that.
Absolutely. I just, as you know, spoke with Donald Payne last week, and he mentioned that you guys went into the halftime generally being ahead. So you guys
Every
weren't
week.
really like angry at each other or anything like that because you're winning. So I mean, how do you even approach that situation?
It's kind of hard because it's like after the first couple weeks, we just kind of realized, okay, this is starting to become a trend. So we gotta like focus in. And, you know, we would be locked in, but it just never worked out. It seemed like it was really frustrating. I guess it's just something we just had to go through. I
Absolutely.
mean, because I don't want to put the blame on anybody because it was just like it was a collective effort. I feel like everybody could have did stuff a little better for us to come out on top. From the
I would
players to special teams to coaching, like literally everybody could have did something better.
agree, and I would imagine that every player on your roster would say the same thing. Donald basically echoed what you just said, so it doesn't surprise me at all to hear you say that as well. But with that being said, you guys ended a lot better than you started. So you guys faced the undefeated Birmingham Stallions in week 9. Did you have confidence in your 1-7 squad heading into the game?
Absolutely. I mean, because I feel like we're probably the best 3-7 team ever, like literally. So, as far as Birmingham, like the way they beat us the first time, I felt like we should have won. And I feel like that's the only game we didn't lose other than Tampa that wasn't on like a last second play. Every other game we lost literally was like the last second or the last drive of the game, like on some game winner type stuff. So
Mhm.
Birmingham, we ended up losing because it was like a late turnover in the game and that crushed us. So but we drove the field and we were in scoring range. You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
I was really confident in beating Birmingham. We just had to pretty much finish the game. That was the main thing. Finish the game and literally find a way to win. By any means necessary. That was our goal. Just win.
absolutely. Um, it was kind of funny to see that game because your guys' seasons were like exact polar opposites. I mean, you have Birmingham that was almost always down at halftime and
Right.
yet always seemed to find a way to win. And yet you guys have you on the other side who are always up at halftime, but always just can't seem to figure out that last end of the game play or whatever it was. It was just so crazy. And then all of a sudden you guys beat them and everybody's like, well, Houston's the best team in the league now. And it's like, well, they kind of always were. It just wasn't following their direction. And that stuff happens in football. That's why they say stuff like any given Sunday. You just
Yeah,
never know. That's what makes this sport so great, so exciting, is that any team can literally win any game. And this
right.
was perfect proof of that. So your team ends up closing out the season 3-7. You win the last 2 games. Talk to me about your confidence in your squad going into 2023, assuming that you would return.
Well, I feel like if everybody comes back, we already know our DNA. So it's like we pretty much had a mindset of like, even though we lost all those games, we had a mindset that we was the best team. Everybody knew we was the best team. Even coaches coming up to us during the season, and they're just like, "Man, y'all gonna, like, I hope it's not against us, but y'all are gonna turn it around because like people see how we play, see our DNAs, people see, our mentality from every standpoint. Like we was a physical team. We special teams. I feel like overall special teams. We had a couple mishaps, but we might have been the most physical special teams. Just our demeanor, like, and that pretty much tells the DNA of your team, like your special teams. We blocked kicks, blocked field goals, scored on special teams, had big explosive returns. Our field goal kicker and punter were pretty good, and you know I just feel like, our DNA showed we had some fighters on the team. Even though we was losing, like we all had a mentality we was gonna win. So
Agreed.
and we weren't gonna give up till we were gonna win. So, I feel like at the end we learned how to win. And, the last game was really like the game that we really wanted to win the worst because it was like, we don't have beef with New Orleans, but it was like the team that we kind of had bad blood with. So it was good to beat those guys at the end. Like, and the way we beat them, that was. I mean, I love that game. That was probably my favorite game of the year.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, I mean, as frustrating as the season had been up to that point, I mean, you have to leave with at least a good taste in your mouth, knowing that you guys collected 2 victories against the only 2 teams that went to the playoffs from the South Division. So technically, I mean, the claims that you guys are the best team in the South are not all that unfounded. I mean, you ultimately were the only team, I'm sorry, that beat the Birmingham Stallions this season. So, I mean, that in itself is worth noting for sure. But this season, you ended up splitting time with Julian Allen. As we talked about, he's a great tight end as well. You guys were a great 1-2 punch for Houston. And you still collected 8 receptions, 75 yards, and a touchdown. Do you believe you did enough in the USFL to warrant another NFL shot?
Um, Film wise, I think we both did. Like I think far as our film, far as our blocking, far as our route running, we did enough. Now I don't know how it works when it comes to like stats because okay, you did have other tight ends that were like statistically better than us, but I feel like as a duo, me and Julia were 1,000% the best duo, and that can do both. You get what I'm saying? Because you got a lot of tight ends. Like tight end is one of those positions, and I'm just being completely honest. Your basically your value is based off of a lot of stuff. So me and Julian just had a mindset of just controlling what we could control and trying to win. That was our main thing. So you had guys like the New Orleans tight end. He was pretty good, but like the way they used him was way different from the way they used me and Julian. So like he's split out most of the time. He's running routes downfield, and they quarterback was slinging it all over the field. Our scheme was more so we're a 12 personnel team. We're gonna have 2 tight ends out there, but we're gonna block and we're gonna run the ball. We're gonna run the ball and we're gonna run the ball. And it's kind of hard to because blocking is exhausting. Like a lot of people don't realize how exhausting blocking is. But just imagine you're blocking for 5 straight plays, and then of course, like they're gonna sub in a receiver to go run the route. I mean, that's just how our team boiled down. And it was some games where, just being honest, me and Julian combined, we might run less than 10 routes in the game, versus other tight ends, they running 20 routes a game, like it's kind of different. So I feel like our film speaks for itself, but like, as far as I don't know how the NFL scouts look at it. I mean, if they look at film, they I feel like they'd bring both of us in, but they look at the numbers, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, see, that's kind of a hard thing to look at because, like you said, I mean, you talked about it before how at times your blocking kind of harmed you in reputation sense from the scouting perspective, but at this point, it's like vice versa. You blocked so much that it's affecting your reputation as a receiver, even though we all know that you're a former wideout. I mean, it's kind of crazy to see, but ultimately, I think, like you said, they're going to look at film. I mean, stats don't matter to guys in the NFL at the end of the day because it's just numbers. It's meaningless numbers at the end of the day. They want to see
And
how you
then,
ran.
yeah,
Sorry,
and
go
then
ahead.
on top of that, I mean, me and Julian, we both.
We just lost your vocals. Sorry, go ahead.
Wait, hold on. So, my AirPods just died, but yeah.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
me and Julian were adamant about playing special teams. So I mean, we played pretty much every special teams. So, and we showed up on special teams. I got a couple tackles. Julian, I don't know if he made any tackles, but he played on more special teams than I did. So, the fact that we can play special teams, I feel like that is very valuable when it comes to like the NFL. Because if we get back in the NFL, that's essentially what we're going to be doing, playing special teams. I feel like our tight end coach, Greg McMahon, he coached for a long time in the NFL, 12 years or something like that with the Saints. And he's very known. So I feel like our coach telling us we did enough. So I feel like, we've done enough.
I would agree. I would agree wholeheartedly. Like I said, you guys showcased exactly what a tight end is supposed to be. I mean, you stopped short of saying it, but the tight end is really two positions in one. If you think about it, it's almost like a mix between an offensive lineman and a wide receiver. So if you're a good blocker, like you said, you're not going to see a whole lot of targets. You're going to be out there blocking on an every play basis. They're going to sub in a wide receiver to run that route. And then vice versa. If you're a wide receiver, converted into a tight end that can't block, you're going to be used like a wide receiver, similar to how Sal Cannella was used with New Orleans. So it's just a really interesting
Yeah.
position to break down because really it's one of the most versatile positions on the field, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
And see, he was a mismatch. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, because he was a former receiver in college,
Mm-hmm.
so he's a mismatch. He was hard to check. You couldn't really check him. So
Yeah,
anyway,
agreed.
yeah,
Agreed. But with that being said, you're that same kind of mismatch, just nobody has quite used you in that same manner and on a full place basis. So only a matter of time before a coach gets it right, in my personal opinion, and has you doing a little bit of everything,
yeah. Hopefully so.
no doubt. So I'm going to leave you with one final question, and this question hopefully won't get you in hot water. I'm sure the Houston fans will like your answer. We've heard reports that in 2023, the USFL will look to expand to one more hub, or at least one more hub, possibly as many as three. We've heard that it could be two northern hubs, two southern hubs. With that being said, is there any better choice than Houston for that second southern hub?
Absolutely not. No better choice. Because I mean, literally, I mean, you see how the XFL fan base was in Houston. So that's enough said. Like I don't have to say anything else. Like that was the best fan base in the XFL, other than DC. But DC is not technically, it's not in this. I mean, it's the South, but it's not the South. So if Houston, perfect place, good weather. I mean, it might rain, it might get a little hot, but as far as selling tickets, you're gonna sell tickets in Houston.
Agreed. Agreed. Now, for the more controversial part and a part that may make you have to think for a minute, would you have chosen Houston first over Birmingham if it was your choice to make?
I'm happy with being a Houston Gambler. I just say that. I mean, of course, everybody wants to play at home, but like, I like my team. I like my teammates. I like my coaches. I mean, we all mesh well, so I just, I liked Houston. I enjoyed it with them boys. Like, if I could go back in time, I still would choose Houston, even though Birmingham won the championship. I would still choose Houston. I would.
That's awesome.
I want to go 3-7 with those boys. I would do it all over again.
Wow. The Houston Gamblers fans are going to love to hear that, man. That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, you couldn't be any more of a team first guy at that point.
Oh
So
yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on, man. I see you yawning. I'm keeping you up late. It's 10:15 on your side of the world, so I'll let you get out of here, man. I appreciate everything. I would love to have you back in the future if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, I'd love to do it again, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So maybe closer to the USFL season, or maybe even here shortly when you get signed by the NFL.
Yeah, we'll see, man. Just keep prayers up, man. Hopefully, I'm working towards it, so I'll be ready for whatever.
I believe it. I believe it. Well, I hope that the news comes soon that you have signed, because I truly believe that you deserve an opportunity back in the NFL. And I think that if a team actually gives you the right opportunity, you're going to stick too. It's not going to be a one and done type deal.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel too. Exactly how I feel.
Absolutely. Well, have a great night, man. And I will definitely stay in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. So once again, everybody, that was Brandon Barnes, tight end of the Houston Gamblers. Again, just a man that has had an interesting pro career. It's been 5 years, and he spanned 3 different leagues, and he's tore it up in every one. Sorry, 4 different leagues, and he's tore it up in every single one. I mean, he's shown his ability as a dual threat, whether it's blocking or receiving. And it's unfortunate that he hasn't gotten an NFL shot that he really, truly deserves. I'm not saying things just to make him, smile or anything by by that stretch of the mind. At the end of the day, I truly believe that he belongs in the NFL. I mean, as I said before, he is the exact prototype of what you want in a tight end. He blocks, he catches, he'll play special teams. He even will stick with his 3-7 team if given the choice. So, I mean, you can't ask for much more out of a tight end and out of a player. And just generally a great guy on top of everything else. So with that being said, I personally will be watching and rooting for him to get the NFL deal that I know he deserves in the future. I hope you guys all follow along with his career because, as I said before, it's been amazing to this stretch, and I'm sure that at some point he's going to hit that breakthrough point and he's going to get everything that he's dreamed of because he's just genuinely a good dude and he deserves it. With that being said, I am going to call it a night on this one. If you guys didn't see my post earlier, I am going to be speaking with AWFC back-to-back champion Marco Garcia. I have said that wrong like 3 times now. I'm so sorry, Marco. With that being said, hop over on the other link. It'll be on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook here shortly. So join me in that one. We'll talk about some AWFC, probably a league you've never even heard of before. But with that being said, the Tri-City Rush are a team you want to hear about. So definitely join us for that one. And with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one.